Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming back to the Stephanie Alonso podcast, where we talk about child development, early childhood education, as I am a child development specialist, early childhood educator, coach. I work with families in the community to help them help their children reach their milestones. And I want to continue the conversation today about the show called Adolescent that's on Netflix. I binged it a few weeks ago, and last week I talked about one of the factors. And as you recall, if you are returning, I mentioned 4 factors that was part of that child's life. The child we're referring to is 13-year-old Jamie. Jamie was struggling with his life. He was struggling with maintaining his social life in school, and one of the factors that impacted him, part of his development, was his peers at school, and the influence that had on his development. He learned a lot growing up from his parents. They nurtured him. And there was a time when the child starts growing and developing, and they start detaching. Early on, we learn that children create a secure attachment, a bond from infancy up to 6, 7, 8 years old. But as they get older, they start to realize that it's time that they want to be more independent. And so they start breaking away from that connection with their parents. And what starts to influence them are their peers, people around them, their community, their social setting. And the number one ways you get that is, being in school, being around other children and being influenced. And it seems like he was struggling. He was struggling to fit in. He was struggling to live up to being a boy. He was struggling with some of the ways that his peers were treating him, mainly girls. He was coming into an age where, as a teenager, he started to recognize that he had interest in girls, and he was probably having sexual feelings. And based on the show, episode 2, it exposes his interest and his connection and his relationship with a classmate, which was a girl, the one that he ended up stabbing and killing. He seemed to struggle with rejection, which the show expressed and started to unfold that the girl just was not into him, and he did not know how to accept rejection. And in doing so, he was obviously not in tune, or his emotional skills were not also developed. Going back to episode 1, and I believe the final episode 4, where his father started to describe that, explain to us that, he was there for his son. He used to take him to sports events. He used to be on the baseball team, but he noticed that the child wasn't as interested in sports. So the dad probably just kind of, stopped, as many parents do. We kind of notice what children are interested in and what they're not. And so at that age, by the time the child is 10, 11, 12, they start to express their interest and their desires and things that they're interested in. And obviously sports was not one of them for Jamie. Also, changes in the child's life that plays a major role was dad started to work more hours as he became an independent worker. He created his own business. He was a plumber, so he wasn't home as much. He was not there to guide and to support Jamie. I know mom was there, but we didn't. Mom's story wasn't easily exposed or unraveled, so we saw a lot about the dad and his feelings and his emotions, and how what Jamie did impact him, and him questioning himself. Was he there enough? Was he the dad that Jamie needed? So back to, his peers, he started to rely on their attention and their influence. And social media played a major role as well. The dad mentioned that Jamie stopped being interested in sports. So, and said that, hey, I'm interested in playing on the computer, playing games with my peers, my friends. So the parents did what usual, what normal parents would do. They bought him a computer for his room. And I think that was probably one of the biggest mistakes. Some children are able to adapt and able to be responsible with a device. Obviously, Jamie struggled because it seems like his social emotional skills were not developed, were not ready. He was not able to make sound decisions. He struggled with fitting in. He struggled with making decisions. And so that led him down a path of, depending on his peers to feel good and to help him with, what life has to offer for a 13-year-old. So that made me feel really, really, really bad that no one was really there for him. He didn't have another adult. He had a sister, but sometimes siblings aren't there for you. They're growing up too, and they're living their own lives. And the show didn't tap much into the sister. The sister looked like she could have been maybe 2 or 3 years older, and it didn't look like they were in the same school. So it looks like Jamie needed the guidance from the parents. The parents weren't there for him. He depended on his peers to help him and guide him and lead him and nurture him. But all that just came to a crashing end when Jamie didn't know how to redirect his feelings. And so one day he ended up meeting up with the young girl, and she rejected him, and he pulled out a weapon and stabbed her to death. And I don't think, based on him talking to the police officer and his therapist, that he didn't realize that the girl's death was final. And so basically, coming from a child development perspective and a coach, it's really important, nurturing your child. They're attached to you. Build that attachment from infancy on, and being around. I know some parents, we have to work, but we, like I said in the previous video, we decided to have these children. It is up to us to be there and be responsible. If there's a 2-parent household, someone needs to take responsibility. I did discuss, in the previous episode about latchkey kids. When we were growing up, children came home alone. There was no one home for them. They opened the door on their own, and so there was no supervision. And it seems like that was what was happening with this child. There was not enough supervision to help that child, to guide him and to lead him on a better path, to make sound decisions. And I want to bring up cognitive skills, which is your thinking, problem solving, and you learn that at a very young age as well. When you're doing peekaboo, you're playing with that child, and a child knows what to expect. That's part of problem solving. That's part of social skills. That's part of emotional skills. When you're building with blocks, when you're solving puzzles, when you're part of a team, when you're on a sports team, you're learning to think and problem solve. When you're with your parents and you're out and you're crossing the street, or even you're in the car and you're putting on your seatbelt, you're learning that these social skills are really important to have, and but also thinking about them constantly, and memory. These are things that you're doing as you're growing, and you're building those memory, and you're memorizing and you're remembering, and which means your brain is getting stronger and stronger and absorbing all that information. But when there's a lack of something, your brain stops growing, it starts developing. And so for poor Jamie, he ended up being arrested, and now, having to suffer the consequences of, facing prison for murder as a juvenile. And what does that look like? Is he prepared for that? Obviously, the parents were not prepared. As a child development specialist, I'd say, continue to be around your children. Just because you think that, they're self-sufficient, they're 13, they're 14, they don't need you as much. That's contradictory. They need you just as much, and even more, because now you're being influenced by outside forces. You're not just in the home. You're not just around grandparents. You're not just around cousins and aunts and uncles. You're around a bigger community. You're around your society. You're walking the streets, you're riding your bike, you're taking the bus, you're taking the train, and you're being influenced. You're seeing, and your brain is absorbing so much. And who's there with you to explain these, things about life? That what that person is doing is wrong. You shouldn't do it. But yeah, you would think that children will reflect back and think about, well, I remember, learning this from my parents. No, that's not the right way to go. Don't go that way. Go this way. But, children and adolescents and teenagers, they're risk takers. That is what they're due. That is what they're going to do. They are going to take a risk. They're going to challenge the norm. They're going to go against the grain. And again, it is up to us as parents to be the soundboard, to be there and to guide and check in and making sure. And so I want to reflect back to the last episode where I said that Dad came home late, and but did he check in? Did he look in on Jamie? Did he connect with him before he ended his night? Did he make some calls during the evening and check in, make sure Jamie's doing what he needs to be doing, finishing up his homework? Were there restrictions about being on the computer? I know in one of the episodes, I believe episode 4, Mom mentioned that she saw the light on. It was late, and she would knock on his door, and then he would end up turning the lights off. But did he really get off the computer? Was he on a phone? We didn't mention much. They didn't mention much about having a cell phone, but I'm sure he probably did. So there was that social media. The teenagers, the peers, it doesn't end, when you leave school. You, unlike previous times where you go home and that's it, you're just around your family, unless you have neighbors who are friends and you can go outside and play, or they come over, or you go over, or you connect some way, or you go to your practice after school. That's how you connect with your peers. But since social media became a thing, the smartphone, you're never really detached. You are always connected one way or another, unless you just completely shut it down. You have that strength. You have that ability to shut it down and to know and tell yourself, no, I don't need it. I'm done. Or you're so busy with your extracurricular. You're doing your homework. You're doing your activities after school. You're going to your sports, practice. And again, going back to Dad saying that Jamie didn't take well to team sports, and so they didn't continue it. Jamie didn't really have an outlet, maybe if he had a therapist, maybe if he was in Boy Scouts or somewhere where he had another elder person to speak to guide him, give him support, give him some answers, be a role model. So basically, yes, be there for your children. The children need you. no matter how old they are, even as older teenagers, 18, 19, they're in college. It is your responsibility to check in. Children, young adults, they can't do it on their own. So thank you for watching. Thank you for coming back and checking me out on Stephanie Alonso podcast. I will be uploading the third installment of the review of the show Adolescence with Jamie, and the next we're going to talk about his community and school and how that impacted him, the society he lived in. So come on back. Thank you for watching. Bye.